Hi and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to talk about borderline personality disorder and how that can often be misdiagnosed and missed out as opposed to PTSD. So stay tuned. Hi there, welcome to my channel. If you are new here, this is the Survivor's Guide to Life. My name is Jessica Lang, and this channel is dedicated to all things trauma, the brain, and healing. So if that's your jam, click that subscribe button and you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. While you're at it, jump over to Instagram where you can follow me there. I post more tips, tricks, inspiration, a little bit about my life, etc., etc. So follow me over there on Instagram, come back over, watch this video and a couple others, and just enjoy the channel. So today I'm just going to jump right into it and talk about borderline personality disorder and how this can often occur with a PTSD diagnosis or can actually be misdiagnosed and the trauma or the PTSD piece is missed out entirely. So there's a lot of misconceptions about borderline personality that I hope that I can dispel in this video as well. So I'm going to start off by reading what it is in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, DSM edition 5. That's the most current edition as of now when I'm doing this video. A pervasive pattern of instability of interpersonal relationships, self-image and affects, and marked impulsivity beginning by early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts, as indicated by 5 or more of the following. Number 1. Frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. Note, do not include suicidal or self-mutilating behaviors covered in criteria 5. Number 2. A pattern of unstable, intense interpersonal relationships characterized by alternating between extremes of idealization and devaluation. Number 3. Identity disturbance. Markedly and persistently unstable self-image or sense of self. Number 4. Impulsivity in at least 2 areas that are potentially self-damaging. For example, spending, sex, substance abuse, reckless driving, or binge eating. Note, do not include suicidal or self-mutilating behaviors covered in criterion 5. Number 5. Recurrent suicidal behavior, gestures or threats, or self-mutilating behavior. Number 6. Affective instability due to markedly reactivity of mood. Intense episodic dysphoria, irritability, or anxiety, usually lasting a few hours and only rarely more than a few days. Number 7. Chronic feelings of emptiness. Number 8. Inappropriate, intense anger or difficulty controlling anger. Frequent displays of temper, constant anger, recurrent physical fights. And finally, number 9. Transient stress-related paranoid ideation or severe dissociative symptoms. If that sounded ominous, I'm sorry, because that can sound really hard. If you are somebody who suffers from or has been given a diagnosis of borderline personality, or maybe you've watched other YouTubers talk about borderline personality, but they haven't actually read what the criteria are, you might have thought, oh man, I might be borderline, and then read that and thought, oh god, I hope I don't act like that. So one of the things I just want to say is that borderline personality disorder is definitely treatable. All of these things are treatable. You don't have to suffer and be in pain or, feel like you're damaged goods and nobody will love you. I just want to get that off the bat. But I also want to talk about, these are very real experiences that people have. And to note that it says on to be diagnosed with borderline, first off, with personality disorders, you can't be diagnosed with it before the age of 18 because the brain, your identity is still forming. I honestly think that what we know of the brain and how that frontal cortex doesn't finish its development until typically age 26 for males, age 25 for females, that really we should probably move some of this these personality disorder category stuff, a little bit later, but they probably won't ever do that, but they should, because when you're 18 and you're 19, when you can be diagnosed with a personality disorder, you're still forming your identity. You're still trying to figure out who you are. So I just want to kind of throw that out there. But one of the hallmarks of a PTSD diagnosis obviously is experiencing a trauma. Like, it doesn't have to be big or small. No one's trauma is worse than anybody else's. It's the fact that your stress response system is triggered, and it hasn't been allowed to complete its natural cycle. And so the survivor is stuck in this kind of frozen place. And when you've experienced multiple traumas, and again, complex trauma, much to most of us our dismay, did not make it into the DSM. And when I when I read this borderline personality disorder diagnosis, what I think about is somebody who's experienced multiple traumas. And a person who's experienced multiple traumas often will display these types of behaviors. Why? Well, let's look at them piece by piece. Frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. So oftentimes that fear of abandonment stems from a history of being abandoned. And again, these are subjective experiences. This is based off of a toddler, a baby, a child's brain. So you can't look at this again with your adult lens, where you kind of have understanding of how people come and go and priorities and stuff like that. When you're a baby, if you have a parent who has substance abuse issues, so they're in and out of your life, babies don't have a concept of time. Toddlers don't have a concept of time. So if they were gone for a week, that could feel like forever. Same thing with parents who maybe have some chronic hospitalizations. You're there one minute, you're not there the next, right? So it's like that feeling of loss, feeling that your needs weren't being met, feeling unsafe, feeling anxious, right? No one ever explained to you or supported you emotionally as you experience like this confusion around this loss. And so all you know is that your primary attachment person is there one day, not there the next, and you have a pattern of this, of people kind of coming in and out of your life. Then it makes sense that like you're gonna start having some feelings about being abandoned. And everybody has their own different sensitivities to this. And so if you're looking at it from like a child perspective or like attachment perspective, that's how you get to that number one. A couple of these other ones, some of the other things mentioned when I was reading the list have to do with kind of arousal levels. And I talked in a different video about states of arousal, the stress response system, and how we all have like a window of tolerance. So when stress happens, if we have a nice wide window, we can kind of deal with the stress. We're not, the weight of the stress isn't enough to kind of cripple us or send us in a tailspin. But if you have a tight or small window because you've had previous experiences of trauma, so that any little trigger sends you into a trauma reaction, you're going to get some of these really intense affective states that are mentioned here, which could also include intense emotional reactions or intense emotional experiences within your relationship. So you're finding somebody thinking that this person's the person of your dreams, you're going to be there forever. You raise them up on this pedestal, they're amazing, they're perfect. Because in any relationship, you have that honeymoon phase, everyone's on their best behavior, and then slowly, we start to let our little stuff out. And whether it's either y'all can go together with it, you can support each other, one person's weakness is another strengths, whatever. That's kind of like the natural flow of how relationships are. You start to really see who the person is. For folks with borderline personality, once the person kind of does something or messes up in a way that kind of signals that alarm bell or signals that stress response system or whatever insecurities or fears that they have, they start to feel like that person is all bad, and they do all these things to kind of sabotage your relationship. And I spoke about it in the other video about this kind of black or white thinking. You're either all good or all bad. And folks with borderline personality sort of really struggle with that. And so, but also people with trauma struggle with that. Again, one has to do with the fight, freeze mechanism constantly being triggered, and looking out for all these potential threats and all the little intricacies of that. And the other one really has to do with kind of just attachment related issues and stuff from your childhood. It has been my experience, and I know other professionals too, that you often just don't see somebody with a flat out borderline personality disorder diagnosis. They almost always have a history of trauma. And again, because trauma is this all-encompassing thing, and we're looking more and more into kind of those early developmental experiences, a lot of things can fall into the trauma category or adverse experience category. So maybe that might feel better to you as the person watching this. Like, you don't want to say, well, my parents weren't there, they didn't take care of my emotional needs, but I don't want to call that a trauma. So you can call that like an adverse experience, or you can call that, you know, a disruption in attachment, or some issues with your attachment. Whatever word feels better, but that's what you're more looking at when you're looking at borderline personality disorder on its own. You're not going to see the kind of those overt traumas like the abuses, or living in war-torn countries, or in dangerous neighborhoods. You're going to see more of that relational piece. Like, it's basically, borderline personality disorder is a problem or difficulties. I mean, it says it in the diagnosis, with interpersonal relationships. So all that stuff comes from those early attachment relationships. So if that's kind of what the primary driver is for you, then you might have a flat out, you know, personality or a borderline personality diagnosis. But if you've experienced some trauma and have some fight, flight, freeze stuff mixed in there too, then you're most likely going to be looking at a PTSD diagnosis. And the two things can occur together. It's probably one of the most common that get linked together, or you see them together, is borderline personality and trauma. But the good news is that both of them are treatable. When I work with my trauma clients, you know, we work a lot on the body and somatic reconnecting and getting in touch with your feelings, but a lot of that has to be done in the confines and the safety of a relationship. The healing occurs through the relationship, because you have to find yourself, trust yourself, but also learn to trust others within like the safety of a therapeutic relationship, where the therapist is going to be able to kind of ride those waves with you, call you out on your stuff, but also not abandon you. Because the thing with borderline personality disorder, and also with some trauma disorders, also trauma reactions that you can have, is that to the layperson, like, it can be very exhausting trying to constantly reassure somebody that you love them, or that you're not leaving them, or to kind of ride their emotional highs and lows. And so people like your friends or your family or your loved ones or your partner or whatever might get burned out doing it. And they don't have those specific tools to give you, to call you out and help you re-regulate when you start to become dysregulated. They can't catch those little nuances that happen just before. And so they can't help you in the same way that a skilled professional is able to help you and to slow you down, so that you can, oh, okay, this is what's going on, and become more aware of your patterns and actively do something different. So again, it's treatable. I like to just mention that, you know, therapy and healing, it is hard, because when you learn all these adaptations, you didn't have to actively think about it. You just learned through your experiences, you learned through repetition. The cognitive piece wasn't really on there. And now that you see, like, this is a pattern in my life, this is something I want to change, I want to do things differently, you have to actively notice those things and actively do things different. So it not only does it feel exhausting to the people around you, but it's also exhausting for you, and it can feel hard. But you can make the changes, and you can live a happy, fulfilled life. Like, you don't have to be scarred with like a borderline personality disorder diagnosis. So if you're somebody who has been given a borderline disorder, has been given a borderline personality disorder diagnosis, please seek out a skilled therapist. Also look in your own history to see if you have any trauma, to be able to tease out if there is some trauma reactions that are in there, that fight, flight, freeze stuff. And if there is, find somebody who's skilled at working with trauma, because they can help you with some of that borderline personality disorder stuff. So just find a licensed mental health professional and go get help. No shame in it. You'll see the benefits. You deserve a happy life, a loving, fulfilling relationships with a romantic partner and or with friends and family, and you can get that. So now it's your turn. Comment down below, what is something you want to know about borderline personality disorder that maybe I didn't talk about in this video? Comment down below. Let me hear from you. I love hearing from you all. And with that, that's all I have for you today, and I will see you in the next one.